This is the Marriage Podcast, and I'm your host, Alexandra Stockwell. I'm a physician turned relationship and intimacy expert, and I specialize in showing couples how to have incredible, passionate relationships. I myself have been married for 25 years. My husband and I have 4 children and full professional lives, and we've created an amazing relationship. If you want to deepen your understanding of your own relationship and learn to access new heights of emotional, sensual, and erotic intimacy, you're in the right place because I will show you how. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, this is Alexandra, and I'm really excited to introduce you to my guests today, Emily and James Williams. I'm excited for a bunch of different reasons. One is that, well, let me tell you who they are. So Emily is a success coach, entrepreneur, author with a 7-figure business who at one point, not technically that long ago, couldn't get a job at Starbucks. She works with female entrepreneurs all over the world, helping them bust through the obstacles that hold their dreams and goals hostage so they can free themselves to live the lives they want. And, you know, that sounds amazing, but Emily puts her attention in so many different areas. And that's one of the things I want to talk about today. There's so much more to say, but let me leave it at that. And James is a performance breakthrough coach and speaker, passionate about creating outer world impact through inner world mastery. Though I bet that sounds really good with your accent. James, will you just give that to us from your voice?
Yes, so I do. I create outer world impact through inner world mastery. I believe that the quality of our output is what creates the quality of everything we touch, right? So our relationships, our work, everything that we touch. So that all happens from within.
Okay, I have a lot of questions, but I want to bring Emily's voice in and say one more thing before I ask you my question. So Emily, anything you want to add? It's very hard to give you a brief introduction. So what else would you like to add?
The only thing would be is that my mastery is really helping women to see that anything is possible and getting aligned with what their true desires are. And for a lot of women, that's to create a lot of wealth, to have a lot of freedom. So we do put a lot of focus on creating a life better than your dreams and creating a lot of money and creating that wealth that people are craving.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah. Your tagline, creating a life better than your dreams, has totally caught my attention because from my point of view, that says a lot about the quality of our dreams and how restricted they are. Like, how great to live in a world where the best thing is for our life to be as big as we dream it, but we need it to be beyond our dreams, most of us. Okay, so I just want to say one more thing before we go further into things, which is that I have admired both of you from a distance for, 4 or 5 years since I first heard of you. But I met you in person for the first time in May of this year. And something happened during that meeting, which it was like this gift to my heart. It was a standout moment. And I immediately thought, okay, I want to share you with the world in my particular way. Both of you are very visible in the world. You share yourselves with excellence and influence, but I want to share you through my lens. And here is what it is that happened in that moment. So Emily, you're a courageous woman. You've reinvented yourself countless times, and you're not that old, from moving from Ohio to London without any particular clear, logical reason to do so. And 18 months later, you have a 7-figure business and a magnificent husband. I don't know if that's quite the order, but we'll go with that. Okay. And you, with a rare humility, were asking for input from a circle of 10 women, some of whom you knew well, some, like me, you just met for the first time. And many of the comments that were given, all were true, but I would say fairly superficial. And then going around with each person giving their input, it was James's turn. The only man not exactly invited to the party, but certainly very welcome there. And when you opened your mouth, James, what you expressed, it was inner mastery, finding outer expression. You talked about your experience of who Emily is, her beauty, her impact, her potency. I don't actually remember the particular words, but it moved me so deeply that you, James, get to have the experience in life of looking at the woman you love and truly perceiving a goddess. It's not a question of whether or not Emily is a goddess. It's that you opened yourself up to receive her magnificence and have the inner clarity and intention to actually articulate it. And Emily, while I don't think you had quite heard that before, what was said, it was familiar to be seen, cherished, adored, and envisioned as you were. And one of the things that was especially moving to me is that I experienced how, James, you saw so much more possibility for Emily than she experienced in that moment, which is really remarkable and wonderful in this very meta way, because that's the gift, Emily, that you give to thousands and thousands of women all over the world. And for me, it felt like this profound, intimate, sacred moment to see that you get that gift as well from your husband. And so let me just start there. Is my description of that moment, does it resonate? Anything you want to add, Emily?
Yeah, no, you're spot on. And thank you for witnessing that and for being able to describe it so beautifully. And, James has been on this journey with me since the very beginning. When I was this girl who had no clue what she wanted to do, he often describes me as having this like fire within, but I didn't know what to do with it. And he believed in me so much that he was the one who lent me his credit card and allowed me to put a big investment on it to jumpstart my business. And so he's been with me every step of the way. And I often say that he's kind of this secret force behind the business. And we're in the midst of a big evolution. And so I was asking for that feedback because I'm curious and I want to pivot and I want to make sure that the brand kind of raises up to the level that I'm at. And so hearing all of your feedback was incredible, but it was, although I've heard James, of course, be supportive of me, the way that he described it was so spot on, described the mission, described what the company is all about. Described me, was so spot on. And I was like, oh, wow, he really gets me. And I know that sounds crazy because of course your husband should get you, but like he really gets it and he gets me and he understands how big this is going to be. And that was just to be seen and witnessed in that way by your partner. I mean, that was everything. And it was incredibly special.
Yes. And we may think our partners should get us, and maybe in the world of shoulds, they should. But the reality is that that was a very rare moment. It was an exquisite moment. And I don't think anyone has enough experience to take it for granted that they'll receive it. And it's why I wanted you to say what it felt like to receive that, because we three know that if you hadn't been able to receive it, there's no way this man would have expressed it. So, James, what would you add to this?
Well, I very much appreciate you seeing and noticing that. I don't really remember what I said either, to be honest with you, but I do know Emily very, very well, and I do believe in her. And I think that is one of the core strengths of our relationship, because we're actually quite different in a lot of ways, but our values and the things we find important in the world are very much in alignment. And I'm extremely grateful for her, because she certainly lit something in me when we first met, and she still does. I mean, I think I'm inspired by her every day, and so it's not only for selfless reasons that I believe in her. It's for selfish reasons. She lifts me up when I'm down, and she shows me what's possible, and I believe in her, 100% of the time, even when she doesn't believe in herself. Because I think it's very, very easy to get stuck in your own stuff. And sometimes the outside perspective looking in, when that outside perspective really is paying attention, can see, when there's just some messiness going on, and can understand that it can get foggy, and it's easy to get, sucked into that. And I see that for Emily as much as I get in that place. We're a human. And so it's actually a real pleasure for me to express that to her, because, I feel it all the time.
So is that something, it sounds like from what Emily described, that you have seen the truth of who this woman is since you met, which I'm kind of sorry about in this moment, because I wanted to ask you, how did you cultivate the capacity to see and experience and receive? Because from my vantage point as someone who coaches lots of couples, I think that often people need to remove the camouflage in front of their eyes to see how magnificent the person beside them invariably is. But you just lucked out, or is there a way you've cultivated it? Has your evolution with how you can see Emily so beautifully evolved?
Oh, of course. I mean, I think that it's a bit like when you're a child and you seem to understand a lot, but you can't verbalize it. And a lot of the times you don't actually understand what you understand, right? And so, of course, over the years, we have worked very, very hard on our relationship. And especially when I left my career and it was clear that we were going to be, working together and around each other 24/7, that wasn't a relationship that either of us had experienced growing up. And so, we worked very hard to create a relationship that we wanted. And in doing that, a lot of the intuition that existed, I guess you could say, made more sense. So, of course, it was definitely developed. But there was a starting point. I'm a very intuitive person anyway. And, I was in my 30s when I met Emily. And so at that point, us guys take a little bit longer to mature. We're slow cooking. And at that point, I was certainly a lot more emotionally developed and intelligent. And so I knew what I wanted in a partner. And when I met Emily,
what you want, you have to be able to recognize it when it's there.
Yeah, exactly. And so then, as Emily described earlier, when I met her, she didn't know what she was going to be doing, but she was like this frustrated genius. She had all this energy and all this drive and nowhere to point it. And I could see that from the beginning, and it was quite exciting, to be honest with you. I could see that there were big things ahead. And I think intuitively, I knew that there was something special that was going to happen. I just didn't know what it was for both of us. And that was intriguing for me. I have an adventurous spirit. And so, that was the catalyst, and the rest is history.
Amazing. Emily, anything you want to add before I pivot?
Yeah, I mean, just that James is very intuitive. And I mean, he often says he knows me better than I know myself, which I think sometimes is true because he has that outside perspective. But he is somebody who sees the truth about people. And I mean, I can count on one hand the amount of people that he doesn't like in this world. And so he's always also seeing the best and seeing, what's possible for people, which is one of the things that drew me to him in the first place.
Mm. It's interesting hearing the two of you speak. I'm reminded of a moment that I had with my husband, which was not with 10 other women present. And it wasn't even saying the most remarkable parts of me, but at one point, I said to my husband, "What do you think is my biggest challenge?" And his answer had me feel so profoundly seen and understood. The thing that he named wasn't anything I'd ever articulated to myself before, but as soon as he said it, I knew it was completely true. And it instantly opened my heart and up-leveled our connection. And so I just want to presence that for anyone who's listening. We're not talking about compliments per se. We're talking about seeing the truth of who our partner is. And that's going to have a lot of different flavors. And seeing it without an agenda, which was true in this moment. My husband was answering a question and you were answering a question, James, which I think is so interesting. And I guess I really want to emphasize that this is very different than giving compliments. It is having the courage to go deep enough inside to express the truth which you perceive in somebody else. All right. So the two of you, actually, Emily, I haven't listened so carefully to your pronouns, and I don't mean that in a gender sense. I mean, when you refer to your business, do you call it my business or you call it our business? I know I've heard you say my business, which is appropriate, but do you ever say our business or is it my business for you?
It's funny you should ask that because there was a time where I did say our business, but I don't say that anymore. And the reason for that is because it is definitely my vision and I'm the driving force of the company. And we realized after a few years, I wouldn't say it's even trial and error, but a few years of trying it out, that it's very challenging to have two CEOs and two people driving the ship. And so kind of, to take you back a little bit, back in 2014, I started the company. I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew what the vision for I Heart My Life was. And about a year later, James left his job and joined me in the company. And he started coaching some of the women who we worked with. They were female entrepreneurs. And he would do like office hours with them. He ended up getting his own coaching certification. And so he was always this support coach. And, I'll let you speak about it in a second, James, but it was amazing to have him as a part of the company. And for a while, I think we thought, well, maybe we're co-CEOs. Maybe there's, a way for him to be a director of operations and then maybe the CEO. But what we ultimately realized was that James loves to coach and that's his mastery. He doesn't want to run a business. He doesn't want to do all of the things behind the scenes. His main mission in life is to help people transform through coaching. And so me wanting him to be in a different role or wanting him to be a co-partner, whatever, that was not in service to his vision. And so I had to really, make a decision and own the fact that this is my company. And we had to figure out some of the nitty gritty of me basically being his boss and how do you navigate that? But yeah, long story short, it's my company.
Okay, how do you navigate that being James's boss, specifically in the context of a marriage, which, well, does the hierarchy translate there at all? I only know this one moment, but I know better than to infer from this one moment that I witnessed.
What did you witness in this one moment?
Well, I mean that I witnessed what
saying
I would describe profound equality when James acknowledged you at this event in May in the way that I'm referring to. And so I know that the two of you dance as equals in your marriage, at least to some degree, but I'm just saying I know better than to infer from that moment where you have that capacity. I know better than to conclude that because you're the boss in the company, you're never the boss in the marriage, just because you had a moment where you were meeting as peers.
I mean, I can answer this. So, I mean, like I've worked for 12 years in corporate. I know what it's like to have a boss or multiple bosses, and it's never felt like that. For me personally, it feels like, I'm support, because what we do isn't a job. I had a job, this is a mission. This is like part of our life. When we go out and, have dinner or go on a date, we talk about this, it's not like now it's 6:00 and we go home and we don't think about it. So it feels to me like I'm just supporting the mission because it's in alignment with what I want to do. There are some other elements that are separate that I do, but ultimately it supports the mission. And, as within our marriage, there are some things that I want to do and I'm good at, and there are some things that Emily wants to do and is good at. And so, I support her in this and she supports me in that. And so that's kind of how it is. It's a respect. I massively respect her role in leading this company, and want to go above and beyond to support that. That's probably been more of the challenge is trying not to bring too much of the husband into the support role of the business, for sure, because it's very tempting to go above and beyond to supporting the business when that's not the role, and it may impact my own work. That's been the only real challenge. There's been no challenges with hierarchy, I wouldn't say, in my perspective.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think tangibly speaking, some of the things that have been the difference makers for us have been, for example, hiring somebody who is in charge of operations, because then that person is actually in charge of checking in with James and assigning him tasks and, doing all of that versus it being me. And I don't want to do that anyway. And so we've learned to treat him just like the rest of the coaches. And we have like moments where that's not perfect. Even just a few days ago, we realized I assumed his schedule was open for something and he had booked this trip with his friends, and my director of operations didn't know. And we have this event coming up, and, so there were still assumptions being made because he is my husband, but we're working on all of that and basically treating him the same way we would treat the other coaches. And yes, of course, he has more of an investment in the company than anyone else besides me because he cares so much. And the success of this company affects him personally. But I don't think that's a bad thing. It's obviously amazing to have somebody on the team who cares so much about the mission.
Yeah. And so, Emily, I'm guessing the answer is no, but do you ever just want to connect with your mission, your vision, your business, and just like completely leave it outside the conversation? Like just interact with James as though you don't share this work together? Does that happen for you also?
Yeah, totally. And we'll be honest and say, I don't really want to talk about work right now. Can we talk about something else? And we've tried to get much better at expressing that to each other when when our cutoff point is for the day. If we're going to take a walk, we'll say, are you done with the business conversation for today? And just be clear with each other about where we're at in terms of what we want to discuss.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is very interesting to me because we're really talking in the what I'm going to call emotional, psychological, and maybe a little bit spiritual realm. And another thing that really moved me when we met is the way that you interact with beauty, Emily. I feel like that is something for people to learn and partake of. And so I don't even have a specific question. I just want you to riff on bringing beauty into the moment and being intentional so that everything feels like an experience rather than just something that happened, because I think that's how you live. Again, we just met briefly, but did I get it right?
Yes. I mean, maybe that would be called, I don't even know the right word for it. I have high standards as well. And I love to be around beautiful things and create incredible experiences. And I mean, I think for James coming into a relationship with me, I've always had like 5-star tastes, not necessarily the budget at first, but that was something, that you kind of had to get used to, James, but now you're fully on board with that life and, the level of which of the thing or the experience that we want to be a part of. Yeah. So, I mean, that's completely accurate.
So will you say how having things be beautiful connects with having a life beyond your dreams, having a relationship that is so penetrated with authenticity?
Yes, I think that I'm really blessed in that I grew up with parents who had a really deep, meaningful, beautiful relationship. They've been together since they were 15. And so I always knew that was possible for me. And I'm starting with that because I feel like possibility is a huge part of the point that I want to make here. And so when I moved to London, my main mission was, of course, to figure out what I wanted to do in my career and what my purpose was. But honestly, the biggest mission was finding a partner. And I didn't know at the time why that was so important to me and why I felt like I needed to do it right then.
Wait, let me just get this straight. You were living in Ohio and you decided to move to London to find a partner?
Well, not necessarily to find a partner, but I knew in my heart I was meant to be in London. And when I got there, love was always a huge mission of mine. At one point, I thought I wanted to be a wedding planner. I was always somebody who was a hopeless romantic. So when I got there, I thought, okay, well, I'm going to throw myself into the world of online dating. I don't know how to make girlfriends. I'm not just going to go up to women in bars and say, will you be my friend? So let me focus on finding a man. And, at the same time, I know that there was like this deep knowing that I was meant for great love and that it was out there. And I don't think everyone is blessed to grow up with that knowing because not all of us see examples of relationships or really trust that there's somebody out there who's meant for us. But I knew that that was possible for me. And so I started to work on myself and I even read, things like The Secret and focused on the law of attraction. And so all these things were happening so that I could kind of prepare myself for meeting somebody like James. And so the reason I'm sharing that is because I really feel like that's the first step to creating a life that's better than your dreams. You have to know that what you want is possible for you and have the belief that it's available, whether it's love, whether it's wealth, whether it's a business, whatever it may be. And a lot of times we work with mainly women. Women have these desires, but there isn't the belief that it can happen for them. And
Emily, I know on the one hand, I could just be like, oh, yes, of course. But there's a lot of different people who listen to this podcast. And so I want to actually just like slow it down a minute and ask you to state the very, what to you may be basic thing that is really worth all of us hearing. Why is it necessary to believe it's possible in order for it to happen?
great question. So if you don't have the belief that something's possible for you, you're not going to put yourself out there or take the action or even, have the mindset to create it. So if I didn't believe that love was possible for me, I wouldn't have put myself on all these online dating sites. I wouldn't have, gone out on a limb and went on tons of dates, blind dates with men, whether, not knowing whether it was going to actually work out. I wouldn't have had the confidence to create a profile, right? So like all these things. And when I translate that to business or wealth or just creating a life better than your dreams, you have to believe it's possible to actually be taking the action, because I don't believe we just like meditate our way to success. I believe in the law of cause and effect. And so we have to do some sort of something to, create this life. And for me, with James, that looked like all the tangible steps I just said. And then in my business, it looked like, okay, well, let's actually get started. If I believe I can do this, let's ask my husband to borrow money to invest in the coach. Let's actually take the steps that are going to get the results.
My experience, both in my own life and in coaching others, is that sometimes we know that we don't believe something is possible. That's actually easy. But more often, we don't realize that we don't believe something is possible until we've taken steps towards it. And enough is revealed for me to, for example, realize, oh, actually, I don't believe that that's possible. Do you have a way of helping identify whether or not we believe something is possible?
That's a good one for you, James.
Yeah, so what you're talking about in my language would be going from unconsciously incompetent to consciously incompetent, right? And so a lot of people can fool themselves into using the language, I believe it's possible, but you can tell by the actions people are taking. Because as Emily said, and it's not even just about her putting herself out there. It's, okay, now I've got a date and there's a guy and we're going to go on a second date. You know, if you really believe it's possible, you're not going to fall at the first hurdle and give up, right? If there's something that if you genuinely believe that it's possible, you're going to wake up with necessity every morning to say, I know why it's necessary for me to keep trying, for me to make it work, for me to look at myself and think, how can I be showing up better? And that's the same as running a business. It's like, I want it so bad, I'm willing to fail my way and improve every step of the way until it happens, because I believe I'm worth it.
Okay, amazing. Will you remind me how long the two of you have been married, or how long you've been together?
9 years married this year, 10 years together this year.
Okay, phenomenal. So what you've expressed is very clear. And a lot of the examples that both of you have given are about the beginning of the journey, starting a business, dating, where it's actually easier to see how to apply these very essential principles. But the thing that I'm super interested in, I've been married for 25 years. I am really devoted to serving couples who are committed to one another. And there's not a lot of talk in general about how to connect, how to keep growing, how to nourish the passion in a way that is full of ease instead of effort. So I guess my question is, having been together for 10 years, would you say, like, give an example of how you apply this, either honestly in a 7-figure business or in a 10-year legendary love affair, so that we can hear how this works, not just at the beginning, but let's say in the middle?
Who should answer? Do you want me to jump in?
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, I think that first off, everyone changes in some way or another as they go through this world, right? And we go back to conscious incompetence and conscious competence. The more conscious we are about that change, if I'm choosing how to evolve rather than just letting it happen depending on what life throws at me, then I'm aware of how I'm growing and what I need. And Emily and I are both consciously taking actions to work on ourselves. And I believe that as with a team in a company, a couple are a team made up of two individuals that strive to be their best. And then when two individuals at their best come together, they're not filling each other up. They're giving from overflow. Now, obviously, there are times when I'm a bit down or Emily's a bit down, and we can top each other up. But I think in a relationship, when your overflow is the love that they're getting, that's a bonus. It's not like, oh, now you've made me feel enough. It's a bonus, which means I was enough, and now you've said I love you, and that's more. And so I feel like constantly working on yourself, taking responsibility for your role is really important. So that you know what you need and can express that, and that you're conscious enough to be present about what your partner needs, so that you can ask and they can tell and you can receive that. Because we're certainly not the same people, or I could say we are, but we're way more evolved than we were when we met. Emily quite often says, old pictures, I can't believe that was you. Right? Because we've got many more facets to us now than we did when we were together at the beginning. And so it's a constant evolution. What I need now is probably different to what I needed a year ago or a month ago. And as long as there's that conscious competency and conscious incompetency, and we're aware of all the things we are and all the things we're not yet, then that makes the conversation between us easier. And it's just all about communication. And, to give you a bit of background, my parents' marriage wasn't that. And I truly believe it's because they didn't communicate. And therefore, there was a complete unawareness of what each other needed. So for me, a great marriage, a great relationship of any kind is real awareness and communication.
Yeah, it's so well put, and the perfect segue to the question that I ask all of my guests, because I really believe that relationship is the ultimate vehicle for personal growth, which is what you've just said in other words. And so I'd love to ask you, James, what have you learned about yourself as a result of being married to Emily?
I think what I've learned is the first thing was all the incompetencies, right? It was all the generational patterns that I picked up from my parents' marriage and my parents' marriage, all of that stuff that I picked up. The little reactions that were like, oh, where did that come from? we used to have a joke, me and Emily, about if she left the butter out, and I'd be irritated she left the butter out. That was our little kind of joke.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah. And so we learn all these little reactions that aren't even us. It's like this program of a thing that's triggered because of something that maybe I was, told off for when I was younger. So you learn a lot of the stuff that's automated, that's not really you, which gives you an opportunity to learn who you want to be. I've learned what I do want and what I don't want. I've learned that it's okay to be an individual and independent, whilst also being a caring, loving partner that really embraces that. I don't need to, I can be on my own and independent as well as part of a team. That's huge and very liberating. I've also learned that the future is unwritten and unknown, and anything can happen, and we get to decide the route. And it's just really exciting because we can't judge relationships by what we've seen any way that we can judge a business by what it's seen, right? And so we get to create any future for us that we want, anything, which, the information for what that is coming in all the time. And we discuss that all the time. And okay, well, how do we pivot? And you want this and I want that. And that's great. And how do we, and so it's constant creation. And my perspective on that is that that's wonderful because, there is no final destination. It's a constant creation and it's exciting. And, it's many, many chapters.
Fabulous. So fabulous. I have a lot of people in my head that I'm so happy they will hear you say what you've just said. Emily, what have you learned about yourself as a result of being married to James?
I've learned a lot about the things that I wanted to transform. And what I mean by that is I think we grow up with a lot of thoughts about how things should be in our heads. And, that information has been passed on to us. And I know just, a silly example, sometimes when we're traveling and sometimes even when we're at home, we don't sleep in the same bed. And I've always been a really light sleeper, but for so many years, I made that wrong, not wanting to sleep with my husband. And then we finally realized that is no indication of how much I love or don't love him. It's just a matter of I wanted sleep and I don't want to be interrupted.
That's
and
such
so
a great example that comes up so often. It's beautiful.
Exactly. So why am I making myself wrong when it really has no, it's no indication of how I feel about him. So it's really owning, what it is that I actually desire. And I think, like I said, for so long, I made myself wrong and I wasn't really honest with myself about what I actually wanted. And so just being able to identify, okay, what is my truth, and recognizing actually the most important thing and the best thing I can do for our marriage is to take care of myself first. Because if I'm at my best, it's going to support me in the relationship. It's going to support the relationship. And so, it's just identifying all these beliefs that I had about what was right or what a good wife should do or whatever. And that really feeds into everything. We don't have children yet, but when we do, I know that James will actually probably be the main caregiver. And there's a lot of stereotypes I have around that as well. I'm growing up with a mom who was a stay-at-home mom, didn't work. And so being able to release that and realizing like there's no right or wrong way to do it, but I have to be true to myself and what feels aligned and give myself permission to focus on me because that will serve the marriage.
Beautiful. So if anyone, or let me say everyone listening, is inspired and wants to connect with you more, we have all of your social media links that'll be in the show notes, but anything in particular that you want to point to, I Heart Your Life or otherwise?
Yeah, the website is iheartmylife.com. I also have emilywilliams.com. And then James, you have yours.
Yeah, I have thegrowthedge.com, and I'm James R.S. Williams on all my social media. So on Instagram and on Facebook.
Okay, magnificent. And I want to put a plug for following Emily on Instagram because they're just such luxurious, beautiful, heartwarming images and messages. I actually don't follow you, James, which is why I'm not making a plug. I'm committed to authenticity, but I'm going to follow you on Instagram so that I know for the future. I'm sure it's tremendous. So thank you both very, very much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Marriage Podcast. Please rate and review the show on iTunes. It really makes a difference. And if you have a question or a comment, reach out to me via my website at alexandrastockwell.com.